I'm in Atherton, California. This is Homer Field at Willie Mays Ballpark. This Little League field honors Willie Mays, our greatest living ball player. And Major League Baseball looks like it's going to do the same thing and give him a tremendous honor.
You are Locked On MLB. Your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast where we talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I am an Emmy-nominated television producer who's been a baseball podcaster for well over a decade. I'm now in my fifth full season here at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. For parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. Stay in the game with eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Motor Guaranteed Fit only available for U.S. customers, and eligible items and exclusions apply. Hey, follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. So yeah, I'm here in Atherton, California, up in Northern California. This is a field that is dedicated to Willie Mays. Now, why is there a field dedicated to Willie Mays here, specifically in Atherton? Well, our greatest living ball player, and arguably the greatest ball player of all time, doesn't live at the field, but this is the town that he lives in. It's a suburb of San Francisco. We're just a few minutes down the 101 from the Southern California in me saying the 101, from down 101 from San Francisco. This ballpark, Homer Field, I don't know who Homer is named after. It's wonderful that it's a baseball term, and it's at Willie Mays Ballpark. And I love that Willie Mays has been so incredibly honored by the San Francisco Giants left and right. The official address for Oracle Park, the home of the San Francisco Giants, is 24 Willie Mays Plaza. 24, of course, is the number that is absolutely associated with Willie Mays, and here this ballpark is done in his honor. I'm going to talk about a couple of things about how baseball is honoring Willie Mays while we still have him, but I just want to talk about the trivia question that I said the other day, and a huge surprise, Craig Brindle once again got the trivia question. I get Craig Brindle on the show. The question was, who was the last Reds pitcher to win a home playoff game? And that would be David Wells. I bet you forgot he played for the Reds for about a minute and a half. David Wells won the clinching third game of the 1995 Division Series when the Reds swept the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Reds then got swept in the NLCS by the Braves. They lost a one-game playoff for the wild card in 99. They got swept by the Philadelphia Phillies in the Division Series of 2010. They won the first two games in San Francisco, then lost all the home games in the Division Series of 2012. They lost the wild card game of 2013. Not only did they get swept in the wild card round in the COVID season, they didn't even score a run. So David Wells was the last Reds pitcher to win a home playoff game. Well, this ballpark honors Willie Mays. That's a good thing. That's a positive thing. We should honor Willie Mays while we still have him. It's one of the reasons why I was so thrilled that on the 75th anniversary of Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier, that Rachel Robinson, who was 99 years old at the time, she's now 100, was not only alive, but she was able to attend the ceremony at Dodger Stadium. I was there that game. I went to that game. I wasn't going to miss it. The only way I was going to miss it would be if the stupid lockout had continued. And fortunately, calmer heads prevailed. There was no more lockout, and Rachel Robinson was able to attend that wonderful, wonderful ceremony. Well, baseball is doing something very cool in the 2024 season. 24, wow. Another connection to Willie Mays. I didn't think about it until I just said it out loud. They're not doing another Field of Dreams game. The Field of Dreams game was a huge success when it came out. And it was a cool idea, playing the game in the ballpark, having Kevin Costner there, having the White Sox and the Yankees come out of the corn. That was great, and it turned out to be a phenomenal game with all those home runs going into the corn. The walk-off home run by Tim Anderson. It was wonderful. The next year you had the Reds and the Cubs. You had to have a Chicago team because Iowa is big on Chicago teams, and Iowa it has a Cubs franchise. And Field of Dreams was about the ghosts of the 1919 White Sox who threw the World Series, and the Reds were the team that won that World Series. That the White Sox were throwing the game. Maybe the White Sox should have been playing the Reds in the first one, but I digress. Well, they tried it again the second time. It was not the huge success. The second time. It was a little bit of been there, done that. Well, they're doing something else, and they're not calling it the Field of Dreams game. They're having, I don't know what they're going to call it. Whatever. I'd say call it the Willie Mays game. And it's going to take place roughly a year from today. It's going to take place on June 20th, 2024. And the San Francisco Giants are going to be playing the St. Louis Cardinals at Rickwood Field. Now, Rickwood Field is in Birmingham, Alabama, and it is the oldest existing professional ballpark in the United States. It was the home of the Birmingham Black Barons from the Negro Leagues, and that was a team that Willie Mays played for. And Willie Mays is also from Birmingham, Alabama. And so there's Rob Manfred, said, like, we're proud of it in this historic field, It's a way to honor the past. Baseball works at its best when it honors the past, present, and future at the same time, that it acknowledges its wonderful past and its wonderful history. And I'm a big believer in honoring people that we, cheer for, root for, while we still have them. We shouldn't always wait for them to go. And Willie Mays is in his 90s. He's our oldest, he's not just the greatest ball player, he's our greatest living ball player. He is, I believe, the oldest living former Negro Leaguer. I may be wrong about that. He is currently our oldest living Hall of Famer. Give us one more year, Willie. I do not want to include you in the next in memoriam video. Just make it to that year the way that Rachel Robinson did. So we can have a game to celebrate his greatness, to celebrate this connection to baseball's past that is still there. Willie Mays still has an aura to him as our greatest ball player, and a connection to the modernization of baseball, as he was there when baseball moved out west, but also a connection to the past and the errors that needed to be corrected. The fact that the Negro Leagues were and that's what they were called. That's what they were called. I'm not calling them anything. For those of you who are not familiar with baseball history, I'm not using a term. That's what they were officially called. With segregated baseball, we never knew who the Willie Mayses of previous generations were. Could it have been Oscar Charleston? Could it have been Boojum Wilson? Could it have been Turkey Stearns? Could it have been Judy Johnson? We don't know. You may not have heard of some of those names. Maybe you have. But they tend to be only baseball historians who tend to recognize the stars from the Negro Leagues, while Willie Mays was a name that even casual baseball fans have heard of. And he was a product of the Negro Leagues. What could have been? And Willie Mays, who, by the way, hit 660 home runs, despite losing at least 2 years of his prime to military service. Imagine if he could have had more. Anyway, I don't think Willie Mays has anything to answer to. But it's a wonderful thing. And I think baseball should have a game like that every year. A game that there is a connection to the past. I like the Field of Dreams thing, but we're not going to go through all the movie stuff, are we? Unless we're going to have a Bull Durham game. Unless we're going to have a Sandlot game where they play a game and there's a big, huge dog right beyond right field. I have an idea for a game that, again, will connect to the past. I think they got to play this game, and please, Willie Mays, please be with us still when it happens. But here's my suggestion to baseball. and you can send me a $1 million finder's fee. I'll give you my Venmo information. Have a game between the Dodgers and the Mets. Have this be in 2025 or maybe 2027, because that would be on an anniversary, a special anniversary. Have the Dodgers play the Mets. Now, I don't know the name of this park. When I was there, it was called Keyspan Park. But it's the home of the Brooklyn Cyclones. It's the minor league baseball stadium that the Brooklyn Cyclones, a Mets affiliate, play in Coney Island. You got a great view of Coney Island. It's right by the beach. It's phenomenal. I used to go to a bunch of games there back when it was called Keyspan Park. It's a stadium. It's a professional facility. Why am I saying that? Have one game between the Dodgers and the Mets there. So for one day, the Dodgers are playing in Brooklyn again. One day. And most of the fans will be Met fans. But if there are any remaining Brooklyn fans or any remaining former Brooklyn Dodgers, you have them there. And for one day, the Dodgers are playing in Brooklyn again. The Giants moved from the Polo Grounds to San Francisco. The New York Giants became the San Francisco Giants. But the Giants returned to their old ballpark, the Polo Grounds, because the Mets took over the Polo Grounds for a couple of days. Willie Mays and the Giants returned to the Polo Grounds as visitors. The Dodgers have never returned to Brooklyn as visitors. So for one game, yeah, let's play that. That would be my suggestion. The Birmingham game, fantastic. But let's play one game where the Dodgers are in Brooklyn. Let's talk a little bit about Birddogs. The Birddog shorts, they do the same thing that Lululemon's, except one big difference. They feel great. They're stretch khaki shorts that are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a great sculpted look. They fit the way regular shorts should fit because they're not made of a stiff and restricting cotton. Birddogs fix the issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice the movement. Birddog uses anti-stink, sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you. We're here at Homer Field at Willie Mays Ballpark in Atherton, California. Recording this before some of the games on Wednesday have finished, but let's review some of the early games. Some have not yet been played yet. The Rays won a statement game over the Orioles. The Orioles have been creeping closer and closer to first place, but Taj Bradley struck out 8. Isaac Paredes homered. The Orioles played some sloppy baseball, and Tampa Bay won that game 7-2. Now, strange game. The Blue Jays, they've been playing well. They've been creeping up along the wild card standings, getting closer and closer to a playoff position. They doubled up the Marlins 6-3. Now, here's what made this strange to me. It was another lousy game from Sandy Alcantara, last year's Cy Young Award winner and the guy who I thought was going to win another Cy Young Award this year. If you had told me that the Marlins would be 9 games above 500, which they are right now, I would have assumed that Alcantara was running away with another Cy Young Award. And alas, the guy lost again, and his ERA is over 5. Now, Marlins fans, take heart. They're 9 games above 500 with a subpar Sandy Alcantara. Can you imagine if he comes back to form? I don't know. Just go back to being mediocre, and that'll be an improvement. But Chapman and Springer got big hits for the Blue Jays, and they got another well-pitched game from Kevin Gausman. That was a 6-3 final there. The Cubs law firm of Horner and Happ got big hits, and the Pirates, they're walking the plank. There's no way around it. They are just in full Wile E. Coyote mode right now, falling off a cliff. The Cubs are now ahead of the Pirates, all right? The Pirates are now they went from first place to 4th place before you could say Francisco Cabrera. They lost today 8-3. They called up Davis, who hasn't really helped their offense because they can't hit. And look at the way this season has been going for the NL Central. The Pirates, great, bad, great, bad, great, bad. They better start hitting great pretty soon because they would have circled the Cubs as a potential easy target to pick up a couple of wins for the Pirates, and they haven't done piddly-poo. They're on a 9-game losing streak. I said there's no bad time to go on a 9-game winning streak. There's no good time to go on a 9-game losing streak. Another game worth taking a look at was Milwaukee versus Arizona. Zach Gallen has pitched really well at home, but not that well on the road. He goes to Milwaukee, and the Brewers got off to an early lead, but don't worry, Miller Thomas, don't worry, Diamondback fans. It was nothing for the D-backs to concern themselves about because Rivera, Thomas got big hits. Gallen was great the rest of the game. The first place Diamondbacks won again. So good for them as they're looking on a charging San Francisco Giants squad. Meanwhile, the Brewers lost ground to the Reds. The Reds, whose winning streak is basically pulled a This Is Spinal Tap because it's gone to 11. And it's been unbelievable that it just seems like they can't do wrong. The Rockies hit a bunch of home runs at the top there. They had 3 solo home runs. They were up 3-0. And, a team that was a sub-500 team 2 weeks ago is on a 10-game winning streak, falls behind on a day game after a night game, and you think, what? They'll won the series. All right, so the winning streak's probably over. A 10-game winning streak is more than anyone could ask for. And then they just rallied. And once again, it was Friedel. Friedel got a big hit to tie the game. And then, surprise, De La Cruz was part of the comeback rally, and he wound up starting the rally in the 8th inning, and Jake Fraley hit a go-ahead home run, and boom, it's now an 11-game winning streak. And couple that with Milwaukee's loss, and the Reds are building up their lead. This is something what they're doing. This is unbelievable what they're doing. And let me put it, we talked about the Polo Grounds and the Dodgers playing in Brooklyn and everything in the first segment. The last time the Reds went on an 11-game winning streak, the Dodgers were in Brooklyn. It was 1957. Gus Bell was part of the Reds. Now, why is that significant? Because David Bell is the manager of the Reds right now. Gus Bell was his grandfather. The grandfather of the current Reds manager was on the last team that won 11 games for Cincinnati. This is something else what's happening. So it's good to be Jeff Carr. So go ahead and listen to Locked On Reds. In fact, if you see over on where I listen to next, we're going to say the little logo I have will be for Locked On Reds. So, good for them. Meanwhile, the Astros and the Mets played a game that I'm convinced neither team wanted to win. Neither team had their starting pitcher get out of the 3rd inning. Both teams played sloppy baseball, running out of the baseline and everything like that. Finally, Diaz homered, and the Astros won the game 10-8. And let me tell you something, Mets. Look, I know everyone has been saying, the Phillies had a bad start and the Braves had a bad start when they won the World Series. The Phillies had a bad start when they won the pennant last year. The Nationals had a bad start. You got to start having that good part of the season because we're dangerously close to the halfway mark. And I'll tell you something you can't do. Yes, I know the Astros are the defending World Series champs and everything, blah, 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 blah. Did I mention blah, 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 blah? You can't lose games where you score 8 runs. You're trying to make up ground. You're going to lose games. Every team loses games. Eventually, the Reds will lose a game. Okay? But when you score 8 runs and your strength is supposedly your pitching, you can't afford when you're trying to climb out of a gigantic hole. You've fallen down the well, okay? And you're trying to climb up. You can't afford to drop games where the offense shows up and scores 8 runs. Or Vogelbach. Vogelbach was a candidate to be designated for assignment. And he got a bunch of hits, including a huge game-tying hit in the 5th or 6th inning. And you're going to blow that? You can't afford to do that. That's not in the cards. You're trying to win a lot of games, making up a lot of ground. And you're going to drop a game where you score 8 runs. You had Christian Javier, Mr. Kind of World Series no-hitter, on the mound. He got pounded. And you can't win that game. I'm sorry, Mets, and I'm not anti-Met. I want to see the Mets do well. Okay? It's good for Ryan Finkelstein. It's good for Locked On Mets. It's good for my cousin Dave, who loves the Mets. It's good for my Met fan friends. I'd like to see Buck Showalter win that long overdue World Series. But holy Marv Thornberry, holy Bud Harrelson, holy Tim Tuffle. You're not going to make up anything. They're falling further below 500 in games where they score 8 runs. Can't do it. I'm going to say this day in baseball. This day in baseball was June 22nd, 1926. And a washed-up Grover Cleveland Alexander was, at his peak with the Philadelphia Phillies, was one of the best pitchers in the history of baseball. But post-World War I, he fought in World War I. He was shell-shocked in World War I, became an alcoholic, and his abilities to pitch spiraled after returning from the service. He was on the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs were in last place, and Joe McCarthy famously said, "We can be in last place without you." And they cut Grover Cleveland Alexander, essentially ending his career. The St. Louis Cardinals were contending. At that point, they had never even been to a World Series in 1926. They took a flyer on Grover Cleveland Alexander, who pitched okay for them down the stretch, and then threw a critical complete game victory in Game 6 of the World Series. And then hung over in the bullpen during Game 7 the next day, was called upon by player-manager Rogers Hornsby to get out of a jam with future Hall of Famer Tony Lazzari at the plate. He struck out Lazzari and pitched the final 2 1/3 innings to clinch the World Series and earn the save to defeat the Yankees, clinching the Cardinals' first ever World Series, rejuvenating Grover Cleveland Alexander's career as he helped also pitch the Cardinals to the 1928 World Series. I guess the lesson there is sometimes you need a change of scenery, sometimes you need a manager who believes in you, and sometimes you take a risk on those pitchers who are available on the waiver wire because they could come in and save the World Series. And on this day, the Cardinals took a flyer on Grover Cleveland Alexander, and it was Alexander who clinched the first of many Cardinals World Series titles. Now for a bit of trivia. Let's see you get this one, Craig. Willie Mays. We've talked about him in the first segment. I'm at Willie Mays Ballpark, famously number 24. Number 24, Willie Mays Plaza is the address of the stadium. Number 24 is retired for the Giants, and number 24 is retired with the Mets. I know some people had an issue with 24 being retired with the Mets. I don't, because Willie Mays' number should be retired in New York for everything he did in New York with the New York Giants. It should be retired in San Francisco and in New York because his legacy stretched both of those cities. But when he first came up to the Giants from the Minneapolis Millers minor league team, he did not wear number 24. What was the first number that Willie Mays wore? That is our trivia question for today. So send the answers to Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram, Locked On MLB on Twitter and Instagram, or down on the YouTube comments. Talking about Birmingham, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and all sorts of things at Homer Field at Willie Mays Ballpark. This has been Locked On MLB. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan, in the harsh sunlight, and you can call me Sully.